Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Daryl Moss. I'm with the Metro Record newspaper. Typically, we'd be having this conversation in a facility. The last 12 years, we did it at City Hall, downtown Springfield. We've used American International College and a number of other facilities as we celebrated Dr. King's birthday. Today, we're going to have a conversation about Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. If you're looking at your screen and I'm not moving, my computer will freeze up from time to time throughout the broadcast. So today we're going to have that conversation. Even more, we're going to read the speech ourselves as opposed to playing an audio or video clip. We're going to interpret the speech for ourselves. Typically, you would see a member of the clergy, an academic or a politician, talking about the speech and telling us what we should think about the speech. Today, we're hearing from regular folks just like you and me, and we'll be reading, reciting, defining, and interpreting this speech for ourselves. So we're going to get it started. We're not going to take up a lot of time. We're going to get this speech started. And I think our first reader will be here in 1 second. So what I'm going to do is let everyone from top to bottom introduce themselves. We'll start with Seneca on the top.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Seneca Lofton. I'm a poet, educator, and recording artist, and I'm definitely excited to be here with all of you today, paying homage to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Okay. Next up, thank you, Seneca. Next, we have Jasmine.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine Click. I am a activist. I work with mental health people. I'm excited to be here and just really talk about this speech.
Okay. Victoria Rowe.
Good afternoon. My name is Vicky. I'm excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you. Shauna.
My name is Shauna Joseph. I am a poet and a law student at Western New England Law School.
Robert Jones.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Robert Jones. I'm an insurance professional and vassal of the community.
A vassal of the community. Well, all right. Teresa Jones, no relation.
All right.
Teresa, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, Teresa
Okay.
Bryant. Teresa Jones Bryant. I am an educator from Springfield. I am an author, and I am glad to be here.
And we're glad to have you. Keyshawn Dodds.
Keyshawn Dodds, Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Club Family Center and also an author.
Okay, Narelle.
Hi, my name is Narelle Thomas. I am a visual performing artist and also an author. Passionate person in the community.
Okay. And Dante.
I'm Dante Moss. I am a multi-location pastor, Black liberator, Black revolutionary, Black activist, all of that stuff,
Well, all right. All right. With that being said, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I thank you all for taking this portion of your Monday morning to spend with Monday afternoon to spend with us and recite this speech and then engage in dialogue around the speech. So thank you, everyone. So in his iconic speech at the Lincoln Memorial for the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, King urged America to make real the promises of democracy. King synthesized portions of his earlier speeches to capture both the necessity for change and the potential for hope in American society. So I'm going to start it off with the first verse. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Seneca.
50 years ago, a great American who today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree.
You're freezing up.
Momentous decree, great beacon, light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. I'm freezing up.
Yep.
Okay. Is it okay now? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay. All right. It came as a joyous daybreak to the end the long night. Okay, awesome. To end the long night of their captivity, but 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. Still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize a shameful condition.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, Black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on that promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. And those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright days of justice emerges.
You're muted, Rob.
But there is something I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on a high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone.
And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes that he has nothing for which to vote. No, no, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
You're muted, Narelle.
Thank you. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair.
I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripped with the words of interposition and nullification. One day, right here in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
That freeze. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. This is the faith we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Lands where my fathers died. Land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring.
And if America is to be great, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, Black men, white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Trying to unmute. I want to thank everybody for participating in this reading. Excuse my screen, it keeps freezing. But I got to ask you guys, what do you think about the poem? What do you think about the verses that you just read? Talk about that. Can people hear? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll start since everybody's being quiet right now. I mean, I think the words, from my perspective, the words are very illuminating and inspirational. When it comes to my passage in particular, you know, I just don't like that turn the other cheek, you know, be the better person. They go low, we go high. Sentiment that it conveys. We've been doing that for centuries now, and it has gotten us nowhere. But I do understand later on in Dr. Martin Luther King's life, his sentiment has somewhat changed. You know, with the phrase or the quote, you know, I feel like I led my people into a burning building. But as I was reading my passage, I was just kind of like, you know, you slap me, I'm gonna slap you back.
Okay. Do you think that should have been the message of the day back in 1963? And since we're dealing with similar issues today, do you think that's a message that, you know, do you think that's a piece of the speech that should change?
I do. I mean, I think when things actually got changed is when we were really coming up on just not taking it anymore. People were fighting back. People were standing up for themselves. They weren't looking down. They were looking up. They were fed up, and enough was enough. And all the rioting and everything that was going on somewhat forced Lyndon LBJ to, you know, pass the Civil Rights Act, even though there was some sort of Machiavellianness in his passing of those laws. But, you know, the holding hands and the marching, you know, they're still telling us to do that. And when you look at the Capitol Hill insurrection, you know, when white folks want to get things done, that's how they do it. They're not, you know, turning the other cheek, or they're not professing, you know, nonviolence or, you know, understanding. They're going to they're taking what they want.
Okay. Thank you. Jasmine, let me turn to you for a second. Then we'll get right back. If anybody wants to respond to Rob, we can do that. There's a part you read. It says, it is obvious today that America has defaulted on the promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked with insufficient funds. You worked on the Black Lives Matter mural, and you did a lot of work with the Black Lives Matter folks. Talk about that. Do you think that what he said still rings true in regards to America delivering the Black community a bad check, a bounce check?
I mean, we still got insufficient funds going on right now. I mean, just like Rob was saying about the Capitol, you know, we were protesting. We were making murals. We were nonviolent in the beginning, and they had, you know, co-stars. They had everybody that they could out there for us. And here they are, jumping walls, running into the Capitol, taking stuff, holding people hostage, and there's no repercussion. Well, there was, but nothing like what would have happened to us. We wouldn't even been able to make it over the wall. So yeah, working on the Black Lives Matter mural, and reading that part of the speech, there definitely is still a disconnect between our government and our colored people. We definitely still have a bad check. We definitely still do not get all of the proper ramifications of the Declaration of Independence that we should. Police officers are still killing us. You know what I mean? The government is still not for us. We are still in poor areas. So definitely, I think it rings true. But another thing for me is, I get the nonviolent side of it and I get the violent side of it. But then we think about, well, faith. What does faith tell us to do? Are we even living by faith? Do we have enough faith to say that we're not going to be nonviolent? We're going to try it this way? You know, so those are my thoughts when I think about the speech and where it relates to today.
Okay. And we're going to tie this together. Seneca, You read a piece and it says 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the menaces of segregation and the chains of discrimination. Still ring true? Talk to me about that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think if you update the language a little bit, probably go, Black or African American for Negro. I mean, it still rings true. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think, Black folks are definitely still suffering because of, obviously poverty, discrimination, everything he mentioned. And just to add, man, like I feel like the first 10 or 11 paragraphs before we get to this, like, more romanticized, phrase, I have a dream, because everybody can kind of recite that. But if you look at the first 10, 11 paragraphs, I mean, it's pure fiery analysis of like pretty much basically what we're going through today. You can probably adjust the segregation type of stuff, but at the same time, like, have we really achieved that kind of equity that he was kind of striving for? And I don't think we have achieved that just yet. But yeah, those two paragraphs, those two paragraphs indeed definitely still ring true today. All you have to do is update the language a little bit, and you could probably pass off as something that was written yesterday.
Absolutely. I think I'm inclined to agree with that. Ms. Jones-Bryant, you read a piece where it says, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels and the highways of the hotels of these cities. We can't be satisfied. Talk about that. Do you think should we be satisfied today? Should we be content? People often talk about, we've come so far. Knowing that, go ahead.
I think those words are relevant today. We can't be satisfied because I feel like we were pacified. We were pacified and then we stopped fighting. But we must push on if we're going to gain true equality in this country. And I just I think about January 6th, and I think about throughout my lifetime how the media, how society has painted the Black man, the Black woman as some angry, violent, vicious person, when it's been them all along. It's been their violence. And I think about how Martin led those marches, and they were met with fire hose, state troopers, horses, dogs, and everything. And I just look at what happened on January 6th, and they were like met with open arms, basically, to some extent. And we're finding out that there are people that were law enforcement, that were in the military, that were playing part to this. I just can't see how we could ever fight, because this lie about who we are has been perpetrated for centuries. Right. And I don't know if it, I go back and forth because, I'm a revolutionist. I think that I would be a Black Panther and I would have put bullets in my gun. But I see how far, the civil rights movement came with the nonviolence approach, and the fact that they got the media attention, and it wasn't until white America could see the violence we faced that anything was accomplished. Right. And I'm hoping that they are getting a clear picture of who they are in comparison to who we are as a people. So I can't see how we will ever be satisfied until we reach true equality.
I don't think I could have said it better. Absolutely. Another verse I heard, something resonated. Victoria, you read a piece that said, this is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. When I think of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think about what took place after Floyd. We got real hot, we marched, we protested, and it seems like we're cooling off. How do you feel about that?
I mean, like most of the speech, it resonates today. We're still going through these things today, and it's really something to be said, because it's like we haven't really seen any true or any grand strides of progressing from this racially institutionalized world. I'm not even going to leave it at America, world that we live in. So, I mean, it definitely resonates today. And it's just a matter of like, what can we do differently? Or what haven't we looked at? What are we not realizing, you know, to do to really get past or really fight through the world that we live in, you know, for our people. Was I muted? Did everybody hear me? Oh,
no,
yeah.
we heard you. We heard you clearly.
Okay.
We heard you clearly. Thank you. Key time. And then we get to the broader conversation. But I got to go back. When you read your piece saying, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up. I have a dream that one day the Red Hills of Georgia. Do you think that he was actually talking about a dream, or was that a wake-up call? Give me your impression and your interpretation of what you read.
For me, I believe it's a wake-up call for all men and women of color, black, brown, white, to come together. That was his dream, that we all can be created as equal and walk as equal. I don't think it's a dream, but it's basically a wake-up call. We've come a long way, but we are so far away from where we need to be. You have that beautiful child that's on there speaking for Victoria. You don't want her to grow up in a world where she has to be looked at different because of the color of her skin, but judged by the content of her character. That's one of the biggest things that I've always stuck out with me. But I know for a fact that we are still not living in a country that is ours. You heard it on January 6th. We're coming to take our country back. It's not to end racism, it's to end white supremacy. That's what he wants done. Because once you end white supremacy, you take away their judicial system. You take away their law and their policies, and you put it to the world's policies, that everyone can be created equal and treated equal. They still see us as 3/4 of a man. I don't want my child to walk out of here worrying about what she can do in her future if she wants to be a doctor, judged because of her skin color that she's not capable, when she's probably one of the smartest people that will always be in that room.
Right.
So
right.
It's something that always resonates with me when I hear that speech of wanting to see my 4 little children one day be able to be judged by the color, not by the judge of the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I don't think that's happening yet because the boardrooms aren't looking like us. The owners of businesses aren't looking like us. Multi-million-dollar businesses, the president and CEOs aren't looking like us. So there is no change. There is no true change until you infiltrate the top. They have done a great job of infiltrating and changing our system to make it their system and to keep control. Even though they are the minority, they are in control. And until we can change that, is then when we can make sure that we are judged by the content of our character.
Okay, appreciate that. And for folks, if you hear something that someone says, if it resonates with you, if you agree or disagree, feel free to jump in. Shauna, you said thinking about everything that took place last spring and summer. You read a piece that says it would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, you go all the way back to Trayvon Martin, all of our young brothers and sisters who have, been victims of white supremacy. What do you think this nation should do when he says it would be fatal for the nation to overlook? It sounds like something that could have been said this morning. How do you feel about that verse?
Reading that verse, I couldn't help but have a feeling of almost deja vu, though I was not in that period with King. The words were illuminating of exactly what happened this past summer with the protests, what they considered riots. So in terms of what he highlighted at that time period and what's happening now, I don't think I don't think our people are going to sit down and be quiet. And I think that's evidenced by, it may not be, we're not reacting violently, like the way Rob suggested earlier, but we are making a lot of strides, in my opinion. If you look at Georgia this past election period, you see it's slowly and it's gradual, but we're taking back, or we're trying to get into positions of power where we can make change for ourselves and our people. So in terms of what we can do, I feel like continue doing that. I think that that's the best possible way that we can get to where we need to be and where there's equality in our country.
Okay. Thank you. Dante, you read the closing verse. What are your thoughts on that closing verse? What were you thinking? And someone said they felt like they were listening to Dr. King when you were reading it. I think Ms. Bryant said that. Talk about that. You're a member of the clergy. Dr. King talked about, the tranquilizing drug of tranquility and gradualism. But when we hear members of the clergy talk about Dr. King's speech, they tend to focus on the "I had a dream" part. They talk about, turning the other cheek and nonviolence. But as a member of the clergy, when you're reading that last speech, his closing, what would you have changed about that? And what resonated with that verse for you, those last three verses for you?
I wouldn't change anything from it. I believe honestly it's a dog whistle sometimes. These men were profound in their thinking. It was iron sharpening iron during that time.
You got to talk. You have to project just a little bit more. I can barely hear you.
All right, I apologize. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
I wouldn't change anything in that ending at all. I think it was masterful. I believe that during that time, these dudes were profound in their thinking, iron sharpening iron. They were on top of the game to liberate Black people. That in itself, the ending was masterful because I believe it's a dog whistle. The sound you only heard by few. I know that they commercialized this speech in general because it seems to so many that it was it's whitewashed, that it's so tamed and everything else. But honestly, it was for that moment when he stood on them steps. It was a moment, and I guess if you're really there to liberate people, you got to think. You got to think critically, and you got to think, in terms of what brings the end result, what's going to get us to the finish line. And of course, in most of the speech, it's a lot of cold. You look out over the sea and you saw so many people, you saw diversity. And if he would have spoke what he spoke in following speeches that he gave, and so many, he was extremely radical in his thinking. But this ending was a dog whistle. Let freedom ring. I think it was honestly telling them to rise up, begin to go into these communities and bring about the change. It was telling them to protest even more. Don't give up, don't stop. But it definitely was not something that was light. It was something to be heard, because after that, King took on a whole nother, it was a transformation for him. Everything that followed King after that, it wasn't trying to be liked anymore. It was like war's on, and so many of his speeches that they don't want to commercialize. It took, I think it definitely was anchored on this.
Okay, appreciate that. And I know we have Brother True. Are you still there? Okay, Brother True?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you weren't a part of reading the speech, but in terms of, give us your impressions in terms of where we are as a country today. And if someone were to deliver that speech, and I know the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has delivered a myriad of speeches, basically saying some of the same things that people are referencing today. Talk about, if that speech was delivered today, what would that speech sound like? Talk about the state of America. Give us your impressions. Please share with us.
Oh, pardon me, brother. I'm in a doctor's office right now. My wife had to have an emergency surgery, so pardon the interruption. But I did hear your answer. I'm sorry, your question. Give me just 5 minutes and I'll get back to that. 5 minutes.
Not a problem. Not a problem. So let me open it up. based on what you've heard from each other and some of the responses, what are some of the things that you would challenge about the verses, or some of the things that you heard? What would you agree with? Let's talk about that. Let's open it up. So it's not just me asking questions. I'm gonna open it up to all of our panelists to kind of just throw things in there, share your thoughts with our community at this time.
Daryl, I think that Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream, and for some white people, it was a nightmare, the very thought of it. And I think that America installed the first Black president, and for some white people, it was a nightmare. We had Donald Trump. I believe America then sought to put in office our first Black female vice president. America thought it was a nightmare again, and then came January 6th. So there's always an action and there's a reaction for it. But I really think that the thought of us having freedom, the thought of the very words that he spoke, frightened white people so much that this is where we are.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in? What does freedom look like? When we talk about freedom for Black people, anybody, Seneca, Shauna, Keyshawn, what does freedom look like? When he said, let freedom ring, what's your idea? What's your ideal image of freedom for Black people in this country? What would it look like if we had it tomorrow?
Well, my ideal, that's me, Keyshawn. My idea of freedom for Black people is equity and equality, where we're not given the slops, the pig intestines in trying to make it into a delicacy. When we have our right to walk into banks and get our business loans and house loans, and being able to grow economic wealth for generations without having things stripped away from us. When we aren't walking out of the doors or teaching our children how to have their hands on 10 and 2 when a police officer rolls up on them, and there's an innate fear of life every time that you leave. Freedom is being able to be genuinely free, to live, grow your family, be where you want to be, live how you want to be, have a system that supports you as much as it does the white supremacists and white fragility, that we need to make sure that we are equal. Even though we do have a lot of Black men and women that have successful lives, there are a lot of us living in poverty, and a lot of us on the brink of poverty, depending on just the reaction or a decision by someone in power. And it was evident when you come to COVID on how many of our own personal businesses have shut down and people have struggled because a government decided to really profit off of this pandemic and also help everybody that had money, instead of really doing what was right and helping people that really needed the help. So being free is having a system that works for us without fear and with growth.
Okay. So given Keyshawn's response, how do we get freedom without compromising who we are culturally? How do we acquire freedom without compromising our cultural and racial identity? Oftentimes we talk about, the successes of today. Okay, some of us have achieved Dr. King's dream. We have great jobs, beautiful houses. We've amassed wealth and capital. But at the same time, we're compromising elements of our cultural values and our cultural identity. How do we do that without assimilation? When we were young, Dante, you remember, the phrase was temporary assimilation for economic gratification. How do we acquire freedom without compromising who we are?
It's a good question. It's a really good question.
You got to be willing to.
It's definitely a good question. Yeah.
No,
very true. Very true. Okay. I wanted to make sure the brother got his thoughts in there. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think you can. I mean, I think you our identities are going to be weaponized whether we like it or not. Nonviolent or violent, no matter what we believe in. We could be victim at any time, basically walking out the door. So I think, we have to be unapologetically, pro-black all the time. But I also think that we have to leverage the tools we have to obviously maintain a living. I think you can be pro-black and working in some corporate office. I think it's all about like the way you think personally and on an individual individual level. Capitalism is honestly, it's predatory. It's literally a predatory system. You have the haves, you have the have-nots, you have producers, you have consumers, you have a wealthy minority that has the wealth equivalent to the bottom 99% of people. So it's a predatory economic system. We have to leverage and learn the rules of the system. I think John Hope Bryant explains a lot of it. He's all about financial literacy and how we didn't get the memo, after American slavery. The rules weren't published, after American slavery as to how to economically, to become economically viable in the country and sustain. He says, like in the NBA, entertainers, those rules are published, right? You know what it takes to get to that level of success because those rules are out there. But as far as financial literacy, ownership, land, real estate, things of that nature, starting businesses, he says we didn't get that memo after American slavery, even though there was like a lot of money in the Black community that ended up, being obviously lost, after a long time, even the real estate and land. But I think you can be uncompromisingly Black and still leverage and still, learn the rules of the system. So that way you can take care of yourself and take care of your family.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to jump in on that? Rob, you were going to say something earlier as well?
No, I just think as a community, we need to stop letting all these outside forces in and start really galvanizing the strength of the Black community and Black creativity and stop caping for other folks. I think we're organic currency in this country. They use us from, there's white people who wouldn't have jobs if they weren't throwing Black people in jail as COs. They drug our kids up on Ritalin and Falkland. That's a multi-billion-dollar industry in the cities and schools. Setting up shops, restaurants and stuff within our city, just draining the resources out of our community and putting it back in other folks' community. When you look at the economic power base in this country, there's a Black community, Black person, Black people tied to fueling, that economy. You look at, state tests, MCAS and things like that. But, multi-billion-dollar industries and all that stuff's in Black communities nationwide. This country can't fund itself without exploiting Black people. So how do we kind of reverse that trend and focus it inward and stop intentionally practicing collective economics within the community? I think that's one of the ways that we get out of this mess, this nightmare.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna read some of the comments. I know hey, Ms. Jackson says she's watching and enjoying. Cynthia Farmer says they are afraid of losing power. And then she made reference to letters from a Birmingham jail. Charles Stokes just said, and I'll put it up so everybody can see it. I don't know if you can see it on your cell phones, but the most honorable Elijah Muhammad said, in unity, we can accomplish much if we as Black people would put $1 away, $1 a day away into a national treasury, we would be free overnight. How do we say we are free when we are asking white people to treat us equal? They said we are free with the emancipation, yet we continue to beg whites for jobs in their corporations. So when we love ourselves, put our funds together, we as always have been put our funds together. We as always been slaves, begging white people to give us equality in this world. Getting a good job, does that make us free, or are we looking at economic development? Is it even possible for Blacks and whites to live cohesively? Based on, the speech, you're talking about, little Black boys and little white boys and little Black boys holding hands together. Is that even a viable option? Is that realistic for us?
I personally think it's realistic.
Talk about it. Tell me why.
I think that it's realistic because, regardless of what we see in front of us now, we do have white people that's on our side. We do have mixed schools. We do have that right now. Is it the best? No. Do we still have oppression going on? Yes. Do we still have those whites that's killing us? Yes. But we also have people of ourselves, our same color, killing us as well. And like we were saying, for us to move forward, yes, we do need to come together. That's part of what Dr. King was saying in his dream. Part of his dream was knowing that every race needed to come together in order for us to overcome. Because if we don't, we're still going to be oppressed. It is something that we can do, but it's just, how do we go about it? How do we find those allies of the other race and then link up with them so that we can then combat the ones that are against us?
I heard somebody say once, it said, if you have 1,000 people charging down a hill and they all have guns pointed in your direction, how do you determine which of those 1,000, maybe 10 or 20 in that 1,000, that mob of 1,000 people, how do you determine which 10 are actually your allies in trying to help you?
Like Muhammad said once, the ones who stand in front of you, the 10 that stand in front of you, the 10 that's standing there.
All right. Thank you. Brother True, you with us?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. I know you've been listening on and off. Give us your impressions of, of the conversation, what today represents and all that. Share with us.
Thank you very much, Brother Daryl Moss, for the invitation. And again, 1,000 apologies to every participant here on just the disturbance. But we're not in control. I'm not in control. God is in control. And that's what's prevalent on my thoughts. I was listening in on what everyone was offering, and I thought that there were some salient points from a number of people, Sister Teresa, and also Brother Robert, salient points. But I wanted to offer this in terms of what I just said a moment ago.
Okay.
And that is that God is in control. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan most recently said to the world that we should listen to what God is saying right now. We shouldn't have too much to say about what's going. We shouldn't have actually nothing to say about what's going on. God is speaking, and contextually, that was dealing with the indignation, as the scripture calls it, but the present pandemic that the world is going through. And so those thoughts prevalent on my mind, I would offer this about today, thinking about a yesterday man. The yesterday man is Dr. King, a most honorable individual, and his work, again, most honorable. But he met with the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And after meeting with the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, if you take a close look, if you use, figuratively speaking, if you use a microscope and you take a close look at his writings, at his speeches, at his public talks, and his personal writings, you'll see that after he met with the most honorable Elijah Muhammad in Chicago, you see a difference in his approach. Now, I'm just asking you, I'm offering you to do this self-analysis or self-examination, and to say to myself, am I spiritually, mentally mature enough to take that closer look at Dr. King? And if we do so, what we'll find is one of his closest friends, Harry Belafonte. He said that after one of his last communications with Dr. King had stated, I fear, after Harry Belafonte had said to him, you look troubled. What's bothering you? He said, I fear that I may be attempting to integrate my people into a burning building.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Going to the last point that was being made, and I appreciate the heart and the willingness of Sister Jasmine and what she spoke on. But what we have presently, we have a situation of global white supremacy that is practicing domestic violence on one of its family members. And so if we were in a marriage relationship and domestic violence was being practiced, the most rational and reasonable response of the one being abused is to say, it's time for separation. Separation does not mean divorce. Separation also does not mean that we will be getting back together anytime soon. But separation means at this point, at this juncture right now, it is necessary for me as the person being abused to remove myself from the situation for a period of time. And during that time, maybe some discussion can take place and we can reach an agreement on the change in the possible behavior towards the future.
And you believe we're at that point right now?
Absolutely.
All right. And let me just pause you for a second, just for, for the other panelists, based on what you heard, what are your thoughts? Because this is interactive. I want to make sure people understand that. Anybody have any thoughts?
I definitely agree. I would definitely agree. I think at the time of King and nonviolent civil disobedience, it was pretty much revolutionary at the time. I think it was only a few people prior to him that he was inspired by, in British occupied, India, a few other writers I'm think of who are, they're kind of like I think Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson, these guys who were, white men who didn't want to support like war efforts, and so they stopped paying taxes. So civil disobedience, was coming along, is evolving. And I think it got to King's generation. They evolved it, they crafted it, and it became a revolutionary thing. And then, like Brother True just said, at some point, King was like, listen, like I feared that like this house is literally on fire. And I think it's a fire that the American government made. I think what we saw on January 6th, something like a lot of us, a lot of white folks are scratching their heads, and black folks are like, yeah, that's how we know white folks to be in this country. White mob violence is very traditional in this country when it comes to our community. And really, they're basically the American government and the Catholic with people that is America's own making. It's America's own monster to deal with. So I definitely think Brother True says a lot there. Like we have to get to a point where we say, well, should we separate? Yes. Should we separate from a time period? Is there power in that separation? And I think there may be. I think we can integrate with resources, but we're never going to legislate hate. All right, we're never going to stop the hate. We're never going to stop how people subjectively feel about us. So right. I think at some point we have to start to develop more of a concern with our own collective and our own, African American, family.
Okay, got you.
let me jump in real quick. I guess as you listen and everything, you're trying to put yourself into that moment. You put yourself back into that timeline, go back historically, and you see what we were up against. Of course, if you ran in and it was violence against violence, there's no way possible that there would have been a victory. It would have been an outright slaughter. Because history told us that even, when John Brown, and his contingency went to the armory and got the guns, Negroes didn't show up. And once you stand up and you begin to talk a certain way, Negroes don't show up, because that's the very thing we're talking about. If we're talking about freedom, then freedom brings in identity. It brings in self-love. It brings in courage. But it's the one thing that was whooped out of us. That's why if we look at ourselves today and as a whole, you find that we lack love, self-love. That's why everything about we see around us, our communities, the question was asked about freedom. What is it? What is freedom? Freedom is your ability to love yourself no matter what. I can walk into a corporation, walk into a boardroom, I can sit down, be the only black man. I love myself, and I will refuse for anybody to tell me that their HR, you know, code says that I can't wear my hair the way I want, or I can't do, you know, or be who I am culturally. And that's the thing that we're talking about. I don't believe that, you know, and I have to disagree with the brother. I've studied these men because they saved my life. I don't believe to really kind of go into it, and I don't want to kind of, you know, create some vibe here. But I believe that Malcolm, Martin, you know, and all the other greats from Fred to Bobby to just the host of them, they were independent thinkers. They brought something to the table. I don't believe that you know, Elijah Muhammad changed, you know, Martin. Martin came on the scene because God sent him on the scene for a specific purpose. That's why they all thinking they put something on the table. They put themselves out there. They didn't conform. Martin was willing to die, but he was willing to die putting his piece on the table just as all the others. The rest of them lived. They survived. They lived to old age, but yet they didn't put everything out there because it's easy for us to speak rhetoric, but it's difficult to begin to talk about true freedom. We've got equality. I live in a diverse neighborhood. I can do as I will and what I will. I've got equality. The problem that we have is that there is no, you know, there's no justice. Justice and equality are totally different. I make money. I got fine cars, but that puts me into a tokenship. It puts me into elitism. That's what's blinded the Black man today, is that we are not looking at it the way we should look at our music and compare it to the other music. It begins to put us into an abyss of self-destruction. We're not standing. We're seeing ourselves in a time bomb sense. But we're talking about a man who stood up on the steps of more or less the wherever he was, and he gives this incredible speech. And I believe it was 63, and yet he had to figure out at that point, at that time, which speech do I give? Do I alienate what is good? Because he says in the speech, he's looking out at the sea of all this diversity. Does he get individuals to enlist, or does he begin to alienate them based on the principles of his own pro-Blackness? He loved being Black. He enjoyed his Blackness. He didn't hide from his Blackness. But he said, your guns, your 6-shooters and pea shooters are no contention for their cannons. But we must stand up and fight for freedom. What is freedom? Love yourself. Don't deny yourself. Don't deny your children. Let them walk in proud. Tell them my mother and father used to, and just really place it in us. That's why when we speak truth. Truth to power. Ain't no, you know, anyhow. All right. You know, it's one of those things. We're talking freedom. Let's, you know, I free the every Sunday, I free the congregation. I free them by talking about the things that should be talked about, not just about a pie in the sky dream, not about some religious, you know, desire of bondage. But let's talk about real freedom. Let's talk about your credit score. Let's talk about what's going to get you over the hump to become free. I'm sorry. Y'all got the
yeah. Right, thank you, Reverend.
Can I say something? I was thinking about what Rob said and what Truth said, and I think that we need to come together as a collective people. I was listening to one of Dr. King's sermon before this, and he talked about, it was right after the Montgomery bus. And he talked about how they came together, and had they not come together to make this change, it was their unity that brought forth change. And he said, if only somebody could tell the Negro up on the East Coast that with collective work, we can make things happen. So I don't think, unless we come together as a people, we're not going to move forward. I mean, we have people just like, we have people deciding who our leaders should be, who we should listen to and who we should not listen to. We have a society that just decided, we don't ever want to hear from Louis Farrakhan in the media. We had a society that told Barack Obama, this can't be your minister. And I just think about Martin and where he was in his last days, that 2/3 of the people, Black people and white people, were against him. and he fought on. And I think that if there's some way that we as a people can pull together, because united we stand and divided we fall. And I believe that. And I believe if there's strength in numbers, and it's okay to invite some outsiders, but I think we need to clean our own house and get our house in order before we start inviting other people, because it seems like when we do that, people try to hijack our movements. There's always somebody trying to hijack something from us. But until you deal with the original sin of this country, you can't hijack us. You can't hijack anything else. You have to deal with what started this. And it was when they brought us over here to this land that they stole from indigenous people. So, and I think until we can learn our history and we as a people can come together, there's not going to be that much progress. And I don't know how you get that to come together in a collective work, that there's not going to be no economic progress. You're right. We can't expect people to give us everything. We have to work and do the work. So,
can I add on to what Teresa said?
Real quick before you speak, Rob, just to let you guys know, my screen has frozen. Keyshawn or Shauna, if you guys can switch folks over for me, if you still have the controls, thank you.
Just very quickly. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go after Robert. I'm sorry.
So, I agree with what Teresa said. There was a bunch of things that resonated with me, but that last part about people hijacking, the system's designed to keep us off balance. So, what are we going to do to get our ground and accelerate progress in our community? And one thing is we can't let people hijack, our movement. We have to stay. We can't be afraid to say Black. I'm on a number of different forums, and people are saying marginalized. People are saying disenfranchised. People are saying people of color, women of color, minorities. They're saying everything but Black. And I think we got to get back to saying the word, living the word, believing in the word, and focusing on what we need to do. Doesn't mean we're anti anybody else, but like everybody else is for their communities and uplifting their communities. It's bad when we do it, but we can't be worried about what other people think. We got to do what we got to do for our community.
I wanted to say something too, in regards to the separation. And I do agree, we do have to come together and we do have to build up ourselves. But like, this is one of the things I've even seen being out in the community. You have so many people that want to be the chief and not enough people that want to be the Indian. And this is in our own community. So how do we bridge that gap to even say, okay, our next step is we got to come together. We got to do this. We can't most of the time even get over our own personal feelings towards our brother or sister to even get over that hump. So then how do we even do that to even move on to the next step of unity within ourselves?
That's a great question. My 2 cents on there is find the people who are willing to do the work. I use the analogy of special forces. Special forces, they go in and they topple governments, and it's a handful of people. Everybody's not going to be able to fit on the boat. Everybody is not going to be able to be a part of the movement, because you also got to watch out for the collaborators as well. But you align yourself with the people who are doing the work. And how you find those people is you kind of just sit back and you just watch. You tend to find people who are doing most of the talking and not doing a lot of the doing. Everybody's a manager of the process, but there's no technicians. Look for the technicians and look for authenticity. That's what I do, and it served me well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything to add on to Jasmine's comment? Because that's a great question, and we get that a lot. Dante, how do you handle, working with people who really want to put the work in and kind of siphoning off those who are parasites or ameliorating the movement and the drive? Because I know you deal with a lot of people.
I think what happens is that you have to ignore them. If you ignore them, because what happens, you engage them, They're the distraction that's sent by the enemy. They're definitely, coming to infiltrate progress. And so most times what we do is we have to ignore them, and you have to teach the people, ignore them and keep moving, because if you don't ignore them, they're going to waste a lot of important time, precious time. And as a black nation of people, we have to catch up on a lot of ground. So those who are detractors, those who come in to just make noise, and those who just, they want to be seen, they want the flash of the camera and the volume of the mic, we have to just really kind of, ignore them, moving to the side, and keep on agenda, because we're at a precious time right now. I still believe in Black people. I still believe that, I guess if someone was to ask separation, if it's possible, do it. But at the same time, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought someone said something, but at the same time, I believe that it's where's the leaves on a tree? They're all different, but they all fall at some point in time, but they grow back all together. And as a people, we're Black. I don't mind blending with people, but I'm never going to lose my Blackness. And we just have to do what we have to do. In my neighborhood, there's a white family across the street and at the corner. I don't worry about their house. I worry about mine. And when I'm worrying about my house, it means that I'm worried about my future, worried about my immortality. So that means I'm literally putting into my children what they need. And those who are grown, they're done. They finished. My job is over. They stand up and they love their Blackness. And, we go from there as a people, man. But I'm with you on going back to Black. I'm with you. I think Rob said it. We got to go back to Black. I understand, I remember the move to go to African American, but we have to go back to Black. They were signing petitions to be called, African American. And I understand, but, we've got to go back to Black, because I believe that there's a sense of pride that comes with just noting that I'm Black, and not as a color, but as a people, because we have no true identity. We come from Mother Africa, but we have no true identity. We're a blend of hurt and oppression and so on. So, but that's my take, man.
Apologize, everybody. My computer crashed. If everybody can hear me, I'm back. I had to get another computer. So we are at the 1 hour mark. So what I'm going to do, I understand we were on the conversation. I'm going to ask all of our viewers just to start having these personal conversations at home, have group conversations with your family, with your church members. And these are things that we need to be talking about on a regular basis. Everyone has a different perspective, a different opinion. It's really critical that people do their homework. There are books. Leave the Facebook status alone. Leave the Instagram statuses alone. Leave the YouTube videos alone. Grab some books and read. I think it's critical that we study and we do our homework. As we celebrate Dr. King and all the greats of yesterday and today, I think it's important that we all do our homework. What I want to do, and I don't mean to cut the conversation off, one by one, people can just give their closing thoughts, and then we're going to wrap this conversation up. Is that okay with everyone? All right, so we'll go from top to bottom. We'll go with Shauna.
So as a closing thought, I think that we should keep being worrisome about repeating history. As we have seen, that people seem to have not learned their lesson, but we can take from this and move forward ourselves. I really connected with the idea of going back to Black, focusing on our communities, our people, our children, the youth that we may think are being led astray. I think in other aspects are also redirecting us on a better path. I think we need to keep focusing on that, building upon that, and making sure that we get to not just equality, but the equity that we need in order to build ourselves higher than we're at now.
All right. Thank you, Shauna. This computer's a little slow too. All right, Dante.
I'm thankful for being here today, but my thoughts, we continue the quest for true freedom, true liberation, continue to unite cross country, across the world, Black people coming together. those who understand our plight and where we are. God bless you all.
Thank you, brother, for joining us. Teresa?
I just want to say that I was reading the speech along, and I really did think, I was like, oh, that was nice of Daryl to put a tape of Dr. King at the end of the speech, and it was Dante. And then he said something. I was like, wait a minute, is that somebody reading? So I had to minimize my speech and go back to the camera. But Dante, wow, you did a good job. So I just want to encourage people to have these conversations, and maybe not even have these conversations with each other, and always speak truth to power when you're with others. And in terms of, I think that we need to go back in terms of, I know people are saying Black, African American. I think that we need to go back to the fact that race is a man-made concept, and it was created to oppress us, so that we all need to be seen as Americans, because that's who we are. And they've done, I mean, and I love being Black. I love my Black list. My ringtone is black, 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 black on black. So, but, and you're right. And that carries a sense of pride for me. But I also don't want to get caught up in the concept that, somebody decided that we were Black and they were white, and Black was bad and white was good. And they made up this whole issue for economic gain. So, I think that, we're going to have to define ourselves and stop letting others define us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. Robert Jones.
Just appreciative to be on this forum talking about Dr. Martin Luther King. I appreciate everybody's insights and everyone's opinions. I just, I would just offer a caution for every Black man and Black woman out there, just, the next few weeks, just to be extra vigilant and careful while you're out there. For my Black women, don't go places by yourself. Always stay protected. And not just over the next couple of weeks, just in general. We need to be smarter in how we move around in this country. And just continue to look out for each other and be authentic and support Black businesses and practice collective economics. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their Monday.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for joining us. Okay, Seneca.
Okay, yeah. First and foremost, definitely want to thank you, Daryl, for having me on. With all these great panelists. It's been definitely a great discussion, a great read. Brother Dante, brought it all home. I thought King was in the building for a moment. I can just close my eyes and just let him read. I'm like, wow, I really feel like he captured the vocal perfectly, and I thought you kept me at the end for that. But I definitely let everybody's read of the speech. I'll say this. I'll say that we have to continue to build a pro-Black agenda. And even though we have our differences, we have our different ideologies, our different belief systems, our different backgrounds, I think we can still come together as a united front, because I think, the enemy exploits those weaknesses, and it makes us appear weak. So I think Frantz Fanon once said that, you can't really enter and open a society until you've strengthened your troops, within your own home, in your own collective. So I just want to continue to say, continue to just keep building that. And I think that at some point, there's going to be a tipping point where we start to get a lot of our needs met. But thank you for having me. I definitely appreciate the time.
Thank you, Seneca. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Jasmine.
Hello. So first, I want to say thank you for having me on. I definitely enjoyed being on with other panelists. My final thought would be, this speech wasn't that long ago. I think about it, 63, and 10 years later, my mother was born. So we are still fighting some of the battles that Dr. King talked about in that speech. We still see some of the oppression that's going on, but like Dante said, the first thing first is we need to love ourselves. We need to be able to give back to ourselves. Separation, building up the Black community, I do agree with that. But we need to also understand that the fight's not over, because there's so much that's going on, that this fight is still happening. So we need to be able to align ourselves with Black people in those positions where we can elevate ourselves. We need not to be afraid to reach out and say, hey, I need help. We don't want to ask for help. We want to always keep things to ourselves. So, my final thought is this speech is not that far off. It's not, it's 63. We're in 2021. No, we should not be saying that we're still oppressed, but we are. So we have to figure out how we can overcome that as a unit. So my final thought is just, link up, know people, get to know people, and continue to use your voice.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Thank you for joining us today. And last but definitely not the least, my sister Narelle. Any closing thoughts?
Hello. Yes. So I'm not sure. Like I was gonna speak a little earlier, like a couple times, but I don't think I was in the queue. But so I'm just gonna try and condense everything to be something cohesive. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be able to listen to everyone's like additions to the conversation. To speak on the passage that I read, one of the key parts of what he spoke on in that for me was, he said, some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. And then he said, continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. We are battling institutionalized racism at every level. And this is a continuous work, a continuous struggle, and something that I think in this time, people should really be attentive to and aware of ways to organize collectively, like Rob was saying, in their best suited position. Like wherever you find yourself, definitely contribute what you can. And I think that's what Dr. King was saying in that particular passage. You're gonna be brutalized, you're gonna be fought back at whatever position you play, but don't give up hope that your work is not going in vain. Your work is not going unnoticed. You're a strong component of this change. So I think we should definitely just continue the work, whatever capacity that means to us. We're not going to be, on the same page as everybody that is also doing work, because communities do have discord. So definitely keep going. Don't apologize for your Blackness. Continue by all means.
All right. Thank you, Narelle. I appreciate that. And I'm not sure what happened to you in the queue. I was definitely hoping to get more feedback, but we'll be doing this again for all of our viewers. Please spread the word. May 19th, we'll be reading The Ballot or the Bullet, a speech by Malcolm X. And with that being said, I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank all of our viewers. Thank all of the guests who were on with us earlier. Thank you to all of our guests who are with us right now. These are conversations, relevant conversations that we need to be having in our community on a regular basis. We had the same conversation in regards to Kwanzaa. We can't just talk about the 7 principles. We have to implement them into our everyday milieu. As we talk about Dr. King, we can't just remember the man and his brilliance. We have to remember the work that the man was doing and do our part to ensure that the work always continues. With that being said, I want to thank everybody. And as everyone else said, we hope that you have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful rest of your day. Good night, everybody, and enjoy.